The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everybody, and a very warm welcome to Comet's digital construction community. This is the monthly meeting for June 2019, entitled Enhanced Project Delivery with Real-Time Insights for Key Decision Makers. Just before we get started, I'd like to say thanks very much to our sponsors for the monthly webinar. That's O2 Business and Rebim. And I'd also just like to take you through the opportunity to use the, to actually use the GoToWebinar facility. Okay, so the audio controls, everybody's on mute during the default. Use these tools to adjust the sound of the audio. It's the red button there at the top to drop the thing in. We've also got a questions tab, which I'll encourage you to use later on in the session. And we will have a poll question session there as well, which I'd like you to participate in. We're not going to have a follow-up survey on this one, but that might be for future use. We did do a survey at the beginning for the registrants, and I hope that a number of you did participate in that. So, on to today's session. Yes, a very warm welcome to the digital construction community. Comet is running a series of productivity webinars for improving construction productivity. And as a lot of you will know, behind all the technology initiatives that our industry is currently driving, improving productivity overarches. Often the best improvements come from a combination of knowledge. It comes from knowledge of the people, the process and the technology. Comet is running an ongoing series that is supported by its members to help companies involved in construction and capital projects to spread best practice and improve productivity across the industry. Again, thanks very much to our sponsors, O2 and Rebim. Yeah, we're looking forward, very excited to this session. I'm asked the question, who's in the digital construction community? Well, this is the first one we've done for a little while, but the previous airing of the productivity webinars that Comet was involved with ran for 4 years, and it had almost 10,000 participants in 632 organizations located in 74 countries. So over 4 years, we built that success, and hopefully we can continue that trend here. Who and what is COMMIT? So COMMIT is an acronym. It stands for Construction, Operation and Maintenance through Innovative Technology. It's a member-based collaborative platform that's based in the UK. It was initially established in 2003. It was a DTI-funded project. And after that completed, it was then supported by its members. It has driven change throughout its existence and focused efforts on helping deliver improvements by bringing organizations together to develop solutions for industry-wide issues. To underpin that, the digital construction community will showcase the current solutions that are being developed and adopted in the capital projects industry. Its objective is to demonstrate improvements in productivity throughout the capital projects world with the development and deployment of technology. Comet will be presenting on the latest use cases of digital adoption, and it will also allow the breadth of participants, which include owners, contractors, vendors, academia and so on, to expose their own perspective on how these technology applications work. I did mention that we've been delivering use cases and industry perspectives through the various channels in the past, and webinars such as this one, the Comet Community Days, Comet Conferences, virtual and live discussions, other documentation reports, and also by facilitating the creation and research of development projects within the Comet community. So I've talked on productivity. Again, these webinars and the sessions are intended to help organizations like yours looking to take a route to higher productivity. So what does it mean to you? Are you doing enough? And what solutions out there are making a difference? The productivity opportunity in construction. Well, there's a few statistics, a few figures there. It is a big problem. The construction sector is one of the largest in the world economy, with tens of trillions spent on construction-related goods and services each year. The industry's productivity has trailed that of other sectors for decades, and there is currently a $1.6 trillion opportunity to close the gap. There's many reasons for this poor performance, from extensive regulation, dependent on public sector demand, it's highly cyclical, highly fragmented, contract mismatches in risk allocations and rewards, and the result is poor project management execution, insufficient skills, inadequate design, and so on. So what can we do? Well, regulation. There's opportunities to reshape the regulation, rewire the contractual framework, rethink design and engineering, improve procurement and supply chain, fuse digital technology into the process, look at new materials and methods, advanced automation, and potentially reskill the workforce. And it's suggested that if we could do that, then we could potentially boost productivity by 5 to 10 times. Pretty bold, but worth a look. Today's session will demonstrate on how productivity was improved at one of SAP's major clients, Aecon. So I'll just move into the introduction now, and I'll introduce Mike. Mike is a solution architect. He will give a more in-depth intro about himself in just a moment, but first I'll mention Johnny, who will join the session later. Johnny Clemens is SAP's Global VP and Industry Business Unit Head of Engineering Construction Operations. During his 15 years in the industry, 15 years plus, Johnny's developed an in-depth knowledge of construction industry best practice, systems, means and methods. He served in the field as a project engineer, project manager, and senior project manager. His executive experience includes roles as a district manager and president. During his career, he has led teams implementing operational excellence best practice in areas such as quality control, building information modeling, project forecasting, business planning, and lean construction. So I'll now hand over to Mike, and Mike will take you through the session. Mike, over to you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Can you all hear me okay? I'm audible, Stuart?
Yes.
Okay, great. So before I get into the meat of the presentation, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Mike Elamazzi. I'm a solution architect with LTI. But up until September of about last year, I actually had spent my previous 10 years of work experience working at Aecon Construction Group. I started actually in the field as a carpenter's apprentice, working on my dad's job sites, who was a senior superintendent with Aecon Group. Worked my way up to being a project accountant, then into the project controls level, and finally when Aecon decided to undergo their SAP journey, I was put in charge as the business process lead for anything to do with operations. So I was essentially responsible and accountable for gathering requirements and making sure that the solution was configured and any customizations that need to happen were done in order to meet the needs of our vastly different business. So with that being said, Aecon was actually one of the first construction companies in the world to have ever implemented the SAP Commercial Project Management module for project management and project controls. And because of that relationship with SAP, a lot of the co-innovated functions that were built for Aecon have actually made their way into the standard product for other construction companies to be able to take advantage of. Now, I'll just tell you guys a little bit about Aecon quickly. It's got 4 different major market segments: energy, infrastructure, mining, and concessions. Well, it did at the time when we did our SAP implementation. We've since sold off the mining division. But Aecon, with $3.3 billion of Canadian revenue in 2018, is the 3rd largest construction company in Canada and the largest publicly owned construction company in Canada, and they actually had a record backlog of $6.8 billion Canadian last year of jobs that are kind of waiting in the wings to be executed. Aecon, if you may have heard of the CN Tower at St. Lawrence Seaway, we were responsible for building some of Canada's most recognizable landmarks. Now, a little bit about our project journey, how we got to SAP, how we kind of moved towards thinking about doing an ERP implementation plan. So Aecon's history, Aecon grew through acquisition. So it started as Adam Clark Plumbing and Heating and eventually started adding different pieces to the portfolio. So the company is actually more than 100 years old. And eventually it's kind of grown to the point where we have a heavy civil division, we have a utilities division, a buildings division, an industrial division, mining division. All sorts of different types of work can be performed by Aecon, and some of it is self-performed, some of it is general contracted. So we have all the different contract types you could think of, as well as all the different types of work you can think of. So why did we need to make the change when we did, when I used to be with Aecon? Well, it was for the enablement of the one Aecon vision. So essentially, as I told you, we have a variety of different divisions that can perform all sorts of different work. And a lot of the projects that are out there in this infrastructure world are multidiscipline, risky projects, such as light rail transit systems. So light rail transit systems are all the rage right now in Canada. We've actually are building them all over the place. And what these particular types of projects have, Aecon realized to put the rail in for a light rail transit system, you need a heavy civil division. So we had that. To do any of the road work around the area, you need a paving division, and we have that. To do the stations, the station work, you need a buildings division. They had that. And to do the utilities work, you need a utilities division. So our senior management back in 2013 came up with this vision of one Aecon, meaning that when we execute joint ventures, we're going to execute joint ventures internally with each one of our divisions being able to provide the necessary expertise. And what that provided to the client was a single person to be talking to, a single face essentially. So if you had any questions about what's going on with the rails, any questions going on with the stations, you're always talking to an Aecon person, and you're always going to get the same level of consistency of message across the board. Now, with that being the case, we then had to figure out a way to replace the tools that we had existing, because these tools, different divisions were using all sorts of different tools. There was no standardized way of doing any particular portion of work. So when these companies would come together to try and execute on a project from under the one Aecon vision banner, there was a lot of issues with them working together and being able to report at the same level across each division that was necessary in order to make this one Aecon vision work. So that's when, in 2013, Aecon decided, you know what, we're going to do some vision workshops. We're going to put together all the requirements of what kind of company do we want to be in the future, and we ended up black boxing that and choosing SAP as our solution. We started building the solution, designing it and building it, and by 2014 in November, we did a pilot go live with one business unit. After that one business unit, we took the learnings from that pilot and continued building and deployed to all of Aecon's Western Canada divisions. So that was about 8 divisions, and those 8 divisions went live in May 2015. And then we prepared for going live with all of Eastern Canada divisions, which again is another 8 divisions or so. And that second deployment went live October 2015. Now, after that period of post-go live support, my role kind of changed from being somebody that was there to help design, build, and implement the solution to now being a person that's pushing adoption of the solution and going to project sites and helping the teams actually utilize the project management tools. So Aecon scope and objectives. On the left-hand side was our scope. We actually, throughout the project, added everything that was in that additional scope area, and amazingly, we finished the project on time and under budget while delivering significantly more functionality than we originally scoped. The data migration, so as I talked about, there was a lot of different ERPs. We integrated 8 different legacy ERPs across all of Aecon into one integrated SAP solution. And you can see some of the numbers that we were able to transfer over. So when we cut over from our old system to our new system, we had 156 companies, 83 legal entities, 320 projects that needed to be cut over, 50,000 service orders, and at least 12,000 employees, 460 unions. So a lot of work went into making sure that that data got cut over. So that was kind of our journey of how we went from disparate systems all over the place to one standardized solution, and why we went to that one standardized solution was to underpin our one Aecon vision and push us towards the future growth that we were looking for, and kind of push us to help us be able to continue to bid and win and execute properly on all these massive infrastructure projects that are coming out in the market today. So how did this solution actually help us manage our projects better? So the first thing I want to show you is a little bit of our architecture. Okay, so we built an integrated solution all the way from estimating to execution. And the goal there was to make sure that how I estimate the project is how I schedule the project, is how I execute the project. Now, that was the original thought behind our project for SAP implementation, which was called Project Bedrock. So as you know, when you build a building, you go down to the bedrock to lay the foundation. This is essentially what our SAP project was. It was laying the foundation for our future growth. So the main components of our solution were hard dollar for estimating, Primavera P6 for scheduling, and then SAP for doing anything to do with project execution. So in hard dollar, I'll give you a little example of how the main project initiation and project structure management and budget management components kind of worked. So the goal here was, I'm going to estimate the job the way I execute it. So in hard dollar, I estimate my cost breakdown structure with 3 activities. I estimate $10, 10 hours of effort, and 10 SKFs. This is SAP lingo. SKF stands for statistical key figure, but it's essentially think of it as the installation quantities that need to be installed on that activity. So $10, 10 hours of effort, and I need to install 10 units. But you can see it's not really time-phased. So we took advantage of the pre-built interface between hard dollar and Primavera P6 to actually push our CBS into Primavera P6, making a WBS, a work breakdown structure. But what was great about this interface is all the activities that come over from hard dollar are already resource loaded and cost loaded. So now once you put in your relationships and your start dates and end dates, you actually have a resource loaded, cost loaded schedule that can be used to perform earned value management calculations by capturing your actuals in SAP and comparing to a time-phased resource loaded plan. The only question was, how do we get this resource loaded plan into SAP? So SAP has something called the EPC, Enterprise Project Connect, which is a standard connector between Primavera P6 and SAP. And it essentially can go either bi-directional. It can take information you enter into SAP and push it back into P6, or it can take information you enter into P6 and bring it into SAP. So at Aecon, we utilized the take information from P6 and bring it into SAP. And we did that by actually saying, we've already estimated the project. We've already got the cost breakdown structure we want. Why would we go through another exercise of actually entering that information into SAP? Why not take advantage of it? Because it's already pre-built. So this Enterprise Project Connect, we actually utilized it to build our project structure within the project management module of SAP, essentially called Project Systems. Then the Project Controls module, SAP Commercial Project Management, is a budgeting management tool. Essentially, it's got a portion of that. So it allows you to generate your budget, but once again, we already have our budget ready to go and set, so why not take advantage of that budget being completed? We had a second interface that then sent the budget, time-phased, into SAP Commercial Project Management. Now, this would be somewhere where a project accountant or a project coordinator would take a look at the information once it goes into CPM and make sure that it's accurate. And once they say, yes, the budget matches what I want it to, then they would transfer it back down into SAP Project Systems, which is the financial system, to make sure that our budget was all in sync and that our financial numbers are now updated. So as you can see, I go from a hard dollar estimate, I get some time phasing in P6, and then SAP via these interfaces gets the complete structure as I want it from hard dollar and the time phased budget as I set up in Primavera P6. So what were the benefits of being able to create that? So for those of you that know earned value management, once you have a time phased resource loaded plan, you can start using that plan to compare the actuals that you're accumulating on a day-to-day basis against that plan. So here's an example of the activity in Primavera P6. We have an install last mile buried new. This was actually a really small project that had to do with, we have Bell is one of the major telecommunications companies in Canada, and they were putting in fiber optic cable for everywhere to provide their Bell 5 services, and they hired Aecon to do all sorts of different subdivisions for them. So this is one of those activities for subdivisions. As you can see, this activity has a start date of September 14th, 2016, and an end date of December 9th, 2016. So this is a screenshot that's captured directly from SAP Commercial Project Management and the project cost status detail report. I added in the cal year month column into this particular report. As you can see, I called it the time phasing view. And for this activity, notice that my budget is time phased between September 9th, 2016 and December 9th, 2016. The value that I get here is if you look over to the actual cost column, if all this information was just kind of collapsed to one line, basically what I would see is I have a budget of 396 versus actual costs of 481. That gives me some information, obviously, that I'm over budget, but it doesn't give me enough information to tell me why I'm over budget. Looking at this particular report, now I can see I'm over budget because not only did I spend more than I was supposed to in October and November, I'm actually 2 months past how much money I should have been spending. So I overspent in certain months where I should have been spending X amount, and I actually went long on the activity. And I'm able to see all that because I can compare my actuals in a time phasing manner to a time phased budget. Now, because we have this type of information coming into the system, we have these actuals being accumulated. SAP Commercial Project Management and SAP are a real-time solution at heart. So as information is entered into SAP, it shows up in CPM in real time. Because we have this real-time solution, we can then start performing some pretty intricate forecasting algorithm, the forecasting calculations to project where we're going based on the productivity we're accumulating in actuals. So here's an example of an activity. As I talked about, SKF's statistical key figures are basically the quantities that you're installing on that activity. So we can see my actual quantities are 358 versus a budget of 313. So I'm technically over, I've installed more than I budgeted for. The system is smart enough to know that because I've installed more than I budgeted for, there's no more room, there's no more runway left to forecast for, you are done. So it actually says, you know what, when I'm at that point, take actuals plus remaining commitments and make it my estimated cost at completion. So as you can see, for my labor and equipment, the actual cost is going over as the estimated cost at completion. But for the materials and subcontractors, I have some remaining commitments. So those remaining commitments are sitting in my ETC. So maybe there's a goods receipt that hasn't come through yet and been completely cut off the books, but it needs to be accounted for in my forecast at completion. But this is where you get a little more of the example of the power of this particular forecasting algorithm. So anything that's hours driven, such as labor or equipment utilization, you can change the forecasting algorithm to meet your needs based on the resource type. So anything that was hours driven, like labor or equipment, we utilized productivity going forward for the remaining quantities to project my ETC, my estimate to complete. So in this particular example, we've done 5,900 quantities out of 9,400 quantities, so I'm about 62% complete. So based on the 62% complete and how much money it cost me per quantity to do the actual 5,858 quantities, my actual unit cost for labor is $1.98. So that $1.98 gets applied to all remaining units going forward, and it's forecasting I need an additional $7,000. For equipment, similarly, we were spending $1.59 per quantity, and that $1.59 is then being applied to all remaining quantities to get back up to my $9,375 going forward. So as you can see on this particular activity, based on the actuals we've accumulated to date, for labor I have a budget of about $19,000, and based on my forecast, I'm actually at about $19,000. And for equipment, budgeted about $15,000, and my estimate at completion is about $15,000 as well. So it looks like, based on our actuals being accumulated to date, we're pretty close to what we actually budgeted for. The problem is we have this $75,901 for subcontracts that wasn't accounted for. So the forecasting algorithm for subcontract, or anything that's commitment based, is the greater of actuals plus remaining commitments or budget. So because I didn't budget for this subcontract, and the actuals plus remaining commitments is greater than 0, it's taking that $75,901 and putting it in my forecast. So now I have a question of, I have visibility to this $75,901, and I see that it's affecting my forecast. Now, if I knew, for instance, that this subcontracted information was due to the fact that we had to hire a subcontractor to help us out on this particular activity due to something that the client asked us about, then there's actually an integrated issues and change management module in CPM as well. And I can take this $75,901, create a change request for it for additional subcontract costs, put my markup on top of it with then get my revenue, and then actually submit the change request directly to the client, all within CPM as a whole. So there's no Excel change log being managed outside of the system. All of this stuff is happening directly within the system and being sent out from the system as well. So I really bring all of my change management and my cost management into one spot, and I'm able to analyze and act upon that in a much more efficient manner than when we had our old systems, as well as side Excel spreadsheets managing a whole bunch of other different pieces of the puzzle. Now, as I said, CPM is a real-time solution. So the information that you're going to forecast, how your forecast actually executes, is only as good as the information you put into the system. So if you're not putting your information into the system on a daily basis, or you're putting your information into the system via some archaic manual timesheet process, then you're actually not getting the benefits of a real-time system until somebody actually enters information into the system appropriately. So we realized this at Aecon, and we said to ourselves, the next thing is we have to create a field data capture solution that's going to make it easier for us to capture information, review it, and make sure that it gets into the system accurately and in a timely fashion, so that we can see problems before they happen and make proactive decisions rather than reactive decisions. So why did we actually do our field data capture solution? Transform an existing manual timesheet process. So I'm sure a lot of you guys out there have an existing manual timesheet process, and you can probably follow along this and nod your head and say this is exactly what I would see. So a site administrator would create the timesheets in Excel, print them off, gather them all together, distribute them to the 4 persons in the field. 4 persons would capture time, maybe on a weekly basis, maybe on a daily basis, maybe on a monthly basis, but in some cases, you know, you're capturing it on a weekly basis at the end of the week. And then they would return those timesheets to the office. The approver would have to collect those timesheets, take a look at them, approve them, and then sign them, and then return them back to the administrators, so that the administrators could complete any information that was missing, upload that information into SAP, post it, and then edit it afterwards if there was any problems. So we have a 12-step process there. we want a 12-step process that actually involves a lot of duplicate entry of information and a lot of double handling of information. We changed this solution to the site admin sets it up on a mobile device. So they set it up in their office and push it out to the foreman. They're the actual timesheets with the guys on their crew, as well as the codes that they're supposed to be working on that day. Foreperson logs into their iPad, has only the crews that they've been assigned to deal with, picks on their crew, enters their time based on which activity, which cost code they were working on, and which guy, and then hits submit. That submit then goes to the reviewer. The reviewer updates any information if necessary, like maybe the foreperson coded the time to the wrong cost code or put too many hours on one cost code versus another. Reviewer takes care of all that, then hits the submit button, and it goes to the approver. The approver then from their phone or any mobile device can say yay or nay and hit the approve button, and it actually gets posted into the system. So we changed a 12-step process into a 4-step process that actually involves the information being set up once, entered once, and once it's approved, it goes into the system exactly the way it was entered. And there's no double handling of information. Eliminate duplicate data entry. So as I said, this is an example of what the foreman would see. So they have their people on the left-hand side. They would simply enter their hours in for their crew and hit submit. That information is then going to carry through upon review and approve and then hit the back end. There's no write it on a timesheet, collect the timesheets, give it to a system administrator, and then an administrator actually manually enters that information into CATS, the cross-application timesheet in SAP. So not only is it double counted, somebody may look at some of this information and maybe a 9 looks like a 6, maybe there's a 9 looks like an 8 or an 8 looks like a 9, and somebody enters the wrong amount. Integrate with the backend SAP ERP. So when you set up the crews for the foreman, you can only set up what exists in the back end of SAP. So it really helps on miscoding or somebody writing a value that looks, again, like something that it's not. Okay, so as you can see here, I picked a project. I'm only getting the networks within that project that actually exist. So only the groupings of activities that actually exist. And then once I click on a grouping of activity, I'm only getting the cost codes that actually exist within that grouping. So there's no being able to enter a cost code that doesn't necessarily exist or having problems with reading information. Everything's validated in the back end and they're able to actually enter their information properly. Enable real-time data visibility. So here's an example of a timesheet that's been approved for 77.5 labor hours, 20 hours equipment. It's broken, the labor hours are broken out into these different cost codes, 31 hours, 8.5, 17, and 21 against those 4 cost codes respectively. And when you come into the SAP backend, you can see the 31, 21, 17, and 8.5 are posted against those activities within the backend. And this all happens upon hitting approved. As soon as it hits approved, it goes into the backend and posts, and I have real-time visibility to this information in my project management tool set in SAP CPM. Now, what's important to note is that we work with a company called RTS to build this, and this solution is actually now available, and you can purchase it off of the SAP App Store. And when we get to the end, I'll let Johnny talk a little bit more about what the SAP App Store is. But the solution is called Fieldplex, and it's made by a company called Converge, who actually works with RTS. And if you have any questions about it, I'm sure we can put you in touch with them. But here's some of the high-level benefits we saw after doing a pilot program with this particular solution. So we actually saw anywhere from a 20 to 30% overall efficiency improvement in the entire process. And this was mainly with the site administrators and the project coordinators. So the site administrators had a lot less time spent on entering data into the system. They actually spent 80% of their day taking those timesheets and entering them by hand into SAP to get the hours in. That 80% was actually relieved from them so that they could do a lot more value add work. And instead of doing time entry, they were helping project coordinators do goods receipt entries and doing service entry sheet entries to actually get cost into the system for materials and subcontracts. And this freed up project coordinators from, instead of doing those data entry solutions, to actually being able to analyze the information a lot better. And again, because the information was getting into the solution in real time, they were able to proactively make decisions instead of reactively make decisions, because they had more time to actually analyze what was going on. Okay, so as I told you, the original project was called Project Bedrock. We did about a year and a half of adoption work from 2016 on to 2018, yeah. And we needed to check in with, so we checked in with the business as we were doing this. We were finding we weren't getting the adoption we thought we would get. We have this great solution. It provides you with the necessary information you need to make the appropriate decisions. You can do earned value management. We weren't really sure why we weren't seeing the adoption we expected. So we checked in with the business and we asked for their feedback. And essentially the user feedback came in, these were the main buckets. The first one was project initiation and subsequent project budget structure upkeep is a little too rigid. So that original interface information flow I showed you, where we go from hard dollar to P6 into SAP. The problem with this was not all projects require the same rigor in project management and project controls. So we had projects that were $500 million and 2,000 cost codes that definitely needed a hard dollar estimate and a Primavera P6 schedule, and 4 years long. But we also had small paving projects that were 3 months long, had 10 cost codes, and they didn't necessarily have the skill set on those projects to have somebody that knows how to use Primavera P6. So this was one of those things where in order to get a cost code into the system, you had to go through P6 to push it in. So you ended up having people that weren't actually schedulers needing P6 licenses in order to update the project budget as well as the project structure. Commonly used transactions are not always intuitive in standard ECC. So again, there's two types of SAP. There's ECC, which is what we were using at Aecon. It's the older version of SAP. And then there's the newer version of SAP, which is called S4 HANA. I'll let Johnny get into the differences between the two, but in standard ECC, you use something called transaction codes in order to execute information into the system. And those T codes, for instance, to create a purchase requisition, the T code is ME54N. So our field personnel were kind of complaining that I don't understand what ME54N means. It means nothing to me, and it's hard for me to grasp how that means approved purchase requisition. It can be difficult to get the data I need. So the reports, again, as we talked about, people are used to seeing their reports in a certain fashion and at a certain granularity, and the reports weren't necessarily in the format or at the granularity the people were looking for in the business in order to make decisions. So Project Bedrock 2.0. So let's build upon the foundation and fix the things that really are hurting the business from adopting the solution. So the first thing was flexibility and functionality in order to address that project initiation problem. We got to build this solution to accommodate different ways of performing the same task, regardless if you're a $500 million project or a $10,000 project. You need to start your project, you need to get a budget in there, and you need to be able to do it the quickest and simplest way possible for your needs. Ease of use. Just like an iPhone, when you pick up an iPhone, nobody reads the instruction manual. You just know how to use an iPhone. This is what we wanted out of the transactions that get used but the most in the field. Okay, so doing your goods receipts, entering labor, entering quantities, etc. It also would help us reduce training time and cost through pick up and go usability. And this is especially important for your casual users of the system. And when I say casual, I mean the people that aren't necessarily in the system on a day-to-day basis, but they are in the system to analyze information and make decisions, like your project managers. If it's difficult for them to do their tasks, they're gonna push back on doing those tasks or use some other way to get that task done. And then finally was reporting. Build a multi-tiered, robust reporting solution. and allow any user to get the information they need. And we were using SAP Lumira and business objects to do that. Okay. So this being the case, the first thing was to reroute P6. So as I talked about, our solution has hard dollar going into P6, then going into SAP. This provided some challenges because your scheduling work breakdown structure is not always the same as your cost breakdown structure. We theoretically tried to build a perfect world where your estimate and your schedule have the same level of granularity, and therefore you can cost at the same level of granularity, but our business wasn't ready for that. Okay, so we had to break the link between P6 and SAP and find another way to get the information into the solution. Not only that, because P6 is a scheduling tool, it's meant to allow you to do what-if analysis, and when you kind of start switching the schedule around and trying to change it up, we really locked down the amount of functionality you could use in P6 because you had to keep the schedule in a certain format in order to get the information into SAP. So what we did was we came up, again, flexibility and functionality, 4 different ways instead to enter your information into the system. One was with a cost structure integrated to the schedule. So you actually, instead of hard dollar to P6 into SAP, we kind of just flipped hard dollar in P6. So now you have hard dollar going into SAP, building your cost breakdown structure, and using the hard dollar to P6 interface to go back and get the dates to bring that back and push it into SAP if necessary. So option A was pushing the hard dollar bid into P6 to get the dates, bring it back into hard dollar, and then go into SAP. Solution B was never touch Primavera P6, only go from hard dollar into SAP and don't care about your dates. Solution C was actually a Fiori application that we built for really simple projects that actually allowed you to build your project structure directly in this Fiori application within SAP. And then option D was a file upload to actually upload something from an Excel spreadsheet into the solution. Ease of use. So this is what kind of SAP Fiori looks like. Instead of transaction codes, you have what's called tiles. And these tiles are actually named something that makes sense as to whatever action you're going to be executing there. And when you actually go into the tile, you only have the boxes or whatnot that are important for you to fill out, that matter to you. You don't have a variety of different other information that doesn't matter to you for that particular function that you're doing. So if you need to do approved purchase requisition, you'll have a tile that says approved purchase requisition. So we already killed labor and equipment utilization with RTS when we built our application for entering information into the system, our crew-based time management. These were the other major pieces of functionality that we started building in Bedrock 2 as they were commonly used transactions. So for entering quantities, we built this quantity management solution that allows you to enter your current period quantities against a cost code within a period that you've decided, or enter your actuals to date, or enter percent complete to date. And when you enter either one of the 3, it automatically calculates the other 2. We also have built in a nice audit trail that allows you to see who the last person that enters quantities was on that particular activity, as well as a graph that shows cumulative increases of quantities that have been entered as you've entered quantities against that activity, so you can see the quantity trend. And again, this would have had to been done in an upload in ECC. So standard ECC, you would have had to create an Excel template and uploaded the Excel using a transaction code, and then checked a couple reports to see afterwards how that information was entered. We built all of that using standard SAP Fiori into this excellent project progress management tool. And then project structure management tool. Add a new cost code to your project, tag the project, tag that activity however you want to tag it, and then add a budget to that activity. And this was, again, all done using standard SAP technology in Fiori, and it basically replaced 5 or 6 T codes that you would have to go to in order to do the same amount of information in a much more easy, user-friendly manner. And then reporting. Reporting was the next big thing. We need to be able to get the information that we're entering. So we're entering information, we need to be able to get at it. So we went on a massive reporting creation in order to make sure that the business was constantly getting the value. And we built actually 30 plus different reports with trend analytics, dashboards, and graphical reporting. And I'm going to walk you through an example of one. So the first one is the combined analytics and forecasting tool. So this was built on top of SAP Commercial Project Management. It is the forecasting tool that we utilized at Aecon, and it allows you to essentially roll your information up, roll your information down based on any of those tags that you used to tag your project structure in that project structure management app. You have a graphical representation of your cost S-curve versus your earned value in your ETC, as well as a graphical representation of your CPI, SPI productivity factor. So not only can you analyze the information in this view, you're also able to actually override the forecast in this view as a project manager would. Take a look at the standard straight line forecasting algorithms that the system produces automatically, but as a project manager, you may know that circumstances are changing and current productivity may not be what you're going to get going forward. There's a variety of different KPIs that a project manager can actually analyze and then make an adjustment to directly within this view. And here's another example of the cost report that we built. And this was essentially built as a short interval control type report that project controls people would look at on a week-to-week basis, whereas this was the solution that a project manager would come into at the end of the month to actually perform their cost forecast. So you essentially can take this project, whatever your project is, and flip it and sort it however you want to sort it by any of the different tags. On the summary tab, you'll see all the key information you need: your original bid, your revised bid, your period earned value, your to-date earned value, the system-generated EAC versus the project manager's EAC, etc. You can then go into the back end from a more detailed tab, and this is at the cost code level. So I'm going to click on this particular cost code. As you can see, it's hyperlinked, and these are all built in SAP business objects, and they're all interlinking reports. So wherever there's a hyperlink, it's actually taking me to a new report. So when I click that hyperlink for that activity, I get this excellent scorecard drill down for everything to do with that particular activity. I can see how many quantities have been completed, what the actuals to date are, what the actuals within the period is, the earned, and then a variety of different graphs and analysis charts that I can take a look at to see how this activity is performing. So I have a cumulative cost quantities trend, CPI and labor productivity trend, and I get all these other reports as well. So cost per unit and earned value to date, total CPI to date, and this trend. If I want to actually drill in specifically to how the quantities are doing, there was a quantity hyperlink that I could click on, and when I click on the quantity hyperlink, I get a graph as well as all the information I need about how the quantities have been entered about that against that particular activity. And then if I want to take a look at the costs, there was also an actual cost within the period, but also actual cost to date that I could click on, and shows me not only by cost type, but a line by line transactional level detail of the cost that's hit that activity. So on a week-to-week basis, I can start from the project level, work my way down to a certain WBS, work my way down to a cost code within that WBS, and then dig into a transaction all the way down to the transactional level on that particular activity. So once we did this, once we made it more flexible to use, once we made it easier to use, and once we built this reporting into the solution, we actually saw our adoption increase by 100%. And it was continuing to grow as by the time I left Aecon. So very important to check back in with the business and make sure that you're always paying attention to what they need so that you're constantly getting the value out of the investment you're going to put into SAP. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Stuart.
Thanks, Mike. That was very enlightening. Indeed. I'm just going to flip to, just beg your pardon a second. I'm just going to flip to the, the sessions. We've got some poll questions. Yeah, thank you very much. We're just about on time, and I think we've got 3 poll questions here, which I'd like to get everybody to participate in. I'm just going to launch the first one. Do you think real-time project controls would add value to you and your organisation? You should be able to see that on the screen now. Mike, can you see that?
We can.
I can see it.
Great, okay. Could I ask everybody to vote on that, please? Looks like we've got 100% so far. I'm just going to give that 20 seconds to run or thereabouts. Yeah, we have a few poll questions here which we thought would add value to this session and encourage a little bit of participation. Okay, we've got 72% voted, and so far we've got 100% saying yes. Okay, great. So I'm going to close that out. I'm going to share that. Can everybody see those results? Mike,
Yes.
Mike, Johnny, any thoughts on those? Any thoughts on that reply, that response?
That's really what we would expect. That's what we hear from most customers.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, good. Right. Well, I've got the next one here. Let me see if I can just launch the next one. Do you think that your current systems are sufficient to manage the current risks of today's complex construction process? Can everybody see that? No.
Yes.
You can. Okay. I'm not sure you can vote on it though. I'm just getting a message here saying, can you see a vote? Is it possible to vote on that? No. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it? I don't think there's an opportunity to vote on that one. No worries. Right. I'll go straight to the last one then. So this is a multi-choice. So what are the other technologies you believe can have significant impact to your company's productivity and profitability? So I'll launch that one. Okay, can people vote on that? Okay, great. So about 50% have voted so far. That's 20 seconds. A couple more. Fantastic. 10% are saying BIM. 55% IoT. Okay, thanks for voting on that. Let me just share that, put that up on the screen. Can everybody see that? 9% BIM, 27% end-to-end, 0 for digital twins. I guess it's a bit early. 9% geospatial, and 55% IoT. Okay, thanks very much for voting on that. Mike, Johnny, any comments on that?
Internet of Things is an interesting one because I find like a lot of the, depending on what kind of construction companies we're working for or you have here, is that the Internet of Things really comes into play when you are a self-perform contractor and you have a fleet of equipment that maybe you're running, or it comes into play when you end up building a project and then you are actually the operations person as well as the maintenance person afterwards. So that's very interesting to see that 55% are picking that, because that tells me a lot about your clients that are on this particular, that are joined today, because they're probably more self-perform and operations maintenance focused company.
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, guys, thanks for that. Right, I'm going to go on to the general questions now, and I've got some questions that have come in. Yeah, guys, can you fire some questions in? I've got one question here that's come up, and I think it's around mobility. How did you go about getting the foreman and admin teams to buy in? Because it looks on the face of it, there was total buy-in to this. How did you go about that, Mike?
Well, that's a great question. And to be honest, the way you get total buy-in is, and this is one of the hardest things with any of these projects. I'm going to tell you that straight up. As I talked about, we had to go through an entire Bedrock 2.0 to fix some of the problems that happened from the first project, because there wasn't, people said they were bought in to wanting to make this change and wanting to be a still company that does earned value management and wanting to be a company that wants to have, estimate the same as schedule, the same as how we cost. We didn't just build it that way because we felt like it. That was the requirements we were gathering from the business. But when there isn't complete buy-in, or there isn't total buy-in, they don't think it's ever going to happen to them so that they can change. So what we did was we actually went to each division and we said to them, we want one foreman, one superintendent, and one admin from each division, and we want you all to come in and help us actually design the solution. And you give us your requirements and what you would want to see in this solution, what would make you use it and what would make it easier. And then as we grabbed all those requirements, we started building it. And this is another key. Do demos consistently and have them touching the solution all the time. Because if they're not, and you kind of take all the requirements and then go out and build the whole thing and show it to them, it could end up looking very different from what they had in their mind. So constantly show the people that are actually going to use the solution in the field how it's progressing and allowing them to play with it and get a hold.
That's really important, that, Mike, and it comes back to what I said at the beginning. The idea of the session was to try and demonstrate productivity and how the use of knowledge of people, the process, and the technology can make a difference. Because behind a lot of the initiatives is a collaborative effort to improving productivity, and they can often come from things that we're already using, but joining together. So yeah, I think that's brilliant. Thank you for that. We haven't got any more questions coming there, but what I would say is we're getting close to the end. So I'll probably close out. Johnny, have you got any comments before we just move on to the next, before we move on to the closeout? Is there anything you'd like to say?
Well, Mike did mention during the presentation that he would have me talk to the SAP App Center. And really what that is a marketplace that we've built where customers and partners who build solutions that can be of value to other people in the industry, we've created a marketplace where those partners can put those applications so that other customers can adopt those, so that everybody doesn't have to build everything from scratch if they're doing something innovative, because there's likely someone else who's done something very similar. So you have the ability to adopt those things as opposed to build them yourselves for those innovative solutions.
Great.
And Johnny, just to add on to that, so it's a lot of the stuff I showed you guys, like the project progress management application, the project structure management application. Those were built by Aecon developers in-house for Aecon. So those are not something that would be available on the SAP App Store. However, the company I work for, LTI, Larsen Toubro Infotech, we actually come from a parent company called Larsen & Toubro, who is an $18 billion construction company in India. They have SAP at Larsen & Toubro and actually made their own SAP practice once they actually built and installed their SAP landscape on their own, and then decided to make that into LTI, a new company. So my company actually builds a lot of the stuff that I showed you that Aecon built that would only be built for Aecon internally. We have some of those solutions already built and on the SAP App Store as extensions as part of an overall engineering, construction, and operations suite that goes alongside with SAP Commercial Project Management for your forecasting, your issues and change management. But some of these time capture apps and quantity capture apps and issue creation applications have also been built and kind of go to bolster the entire solution and are available on the App Store.
Great. Well, thank you for explaining that, Mike. We're coming to the end of the session, and I've just got a few more announcements to make here. But I'll say thanks, guys, for putting it together. Really appreciate that. The first thing I want to mention is is on the 4th and 5th of July next week. There's a conference, a comic conference, and it's at the Bentley Institute. Please do follow the link there that's on screen. Go to the comic website. It's going to be broadcast around the world to 6 locations. Sorry?
I think you need to share your screen there, Stuart. I'm not seeing anything on the...
Oh, is it stopped showing? Okay, beg your pardon, yeah. We'll just jump back.
There you go.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's gone backwards, yeah. So the link on the website there, or on the page, follow that through. But it's the 4th and 5th, it's at the Bentley Institute in London. It's been broadcast around the world at 6 locations with live streaming, and there's space for 120 people in the venue. These are all the sort of people involved speaking. We've even got a visit from a jet propulsion engineer from NASA to come along and speak about similarities. So thank you very much for that. I also just want to thank our sponsors, O2 and Rebim. Thanks to Mike, thanks to Johnny, SAP and LTI. Great presentation. I'm sure a lot of people have got a lot of value from that today. I'd really like to say, please continue the conversation through our social media channels. There they are. Love to hear from you. I'd also like to say that the next session is on the 25th of July, and that's going to be from O2, the construction building a smarter, more connected future. Talking about the challenges that construction customers face, the opportunities to overcome them, where technology can help, with the appropriate platform. We'll also be discussing how connectivity, mobility, and insights are 4 key pillars of this platform, as well as hearing from a construction customer about how, with O2's help, they can address the areas that deliver business benefit. But if you have any questions or anything in between, please do get in touch. And again, I'd like to say thank you very much for everybody's help, participation. Special thanks to the sponsors. We couldn't make this happen without you. And we'll see you on the next one. But thanks, guys, and we'll speak soon. Cheerio. Thank you.
Thank you.